ever scroll through the news and, suddenly feel that urge to like cancel that beach vacation? You see one shark attack makes headlines, and then suddenly you feel like they're lurking around every corner, even though like statistically you're more likely to just get a sunburn.
Yeah, what you're describing is like a prime example of the availability heuristic. That's that mental shortcut our brains use to kind of make those quick judgments.
A shortcut, huh? So you mean like my brain's just taking the easy way out, kind of skipping the whole in-depth analysis?
Exactly. Our brains, they're constantly bombarded with like so much information, so they develop these heuristics to keep up. And this availability heuristic, it specifically, well, it says that we tend to like judge the likelihood of something happening based on how easily we can think of examples.
Oh, okay. So that shark attack footage, it's way more vivid and, available in my memory than all the times I've been in the ocean and like not encountered a shark.
Precisely. The availability heuristic, it highlights how vivid or like emotionally charged information it can, how do I say this? It can disproportionately influence our perceptions of risk. The easier it is to recall something, the more likely we think it is to happen again.
Okay, that makes sense. So that explains like the whole shark attack anxiety after watching, the news and everything. But how does this availability bias, how does that play out in other areas of life?
Well, let's think about how, like, media coverage, which often is skewed towards the sensational, how that impacts us. The availability heuristic, it helps explain why we might be more afraid of plane crashes than car accidents, even though statistically driving is way riskier. It's just that those vivid images of plane crashes, they're much more readily available in our minds. So they seem more common than they actually are.
It's like our brains go, if I can easily picture it, well, it must be a real and present danger.
And that's where this whole mental shortcut thing can lead us astray. Like, take, for example, survivor bias. We hear about lottery winners and, all those successful entrepreneurs. And so it makes those outcomes seem way more achievable than they really are.
Right.
But what we don't see are the countless stories of people who, played the lottery and didn't win, or like started businesses that totally flop. So that readily available information, it really skews our perception of the actual odds.
So the availability heuristic is essentially our brains just playing favorites with information, right? Like it's like a news feed that only shows the most dramatic or, emotionally engaging stories.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And this whole bias thing, it doesn't just affect like our perception of risk. No, it can also influence our self-image and even our relationships.
You mean like how scrolling through, social media can make us feel inadequate because we're constantly bombarded with everyone else's highlight reels?
Right.
Exactly. Social media, it's like a breeding ground for the availability heuristic. We see those picture-perfect vacations, seemingly blissful relationships, and all those impressive career milestones. And it can make our own lives feel, well, less exciting or like less successful by comparison.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these, curated online personas, they rarely reflect the full picture.
It's like everyone's selling a product online, and that product is their, supposedly perfect life.
Precisely. And because those images are so readily available, it's so easy to fall into that trap of comparing ourselves and feeling like we're not measuring up.
Wow, this is giving me a lot to think about. But if our brains are wired for these shortcuts, is there any way to like outsmart our inherent biases? So we've established that our brains, well, they really love a good shortcut, even if it leads to some, skewed perceptions. But is there anything we can do about it? Can we rewire those neural pathways? Can we make less biased judgments?
Yeah. Well, while we can't completely get rid of the availability heuristic altogether, we can definitely become more aware of it. Like, we can become more conscious of how much it influences us and, develop strategies to sort of mitigate its impact.
Okay, so how do we do that? Give us the tools to like outsmart our own brains.
One approach that's pretty effective is to diversify our information diets. So like if you're someone who's constantly consuming news that focuses on, all the bad stuff, all the negative events, then you should try to actively look for sources that offer a more balanced perspective.
So break free from those echo chambers, right?
Yeah.
Especially online where, algorithms are constantly trying to feed us more of what we've already liked or clicked on.
Exactly. Expose yourself to different viewpoints and, try to challenge your own assumptions. Another helpful strategy is to separate emotional impact from statistical likelihood. It's totally natural to feel anxious after hearing about, like, a plane crash, but remind yourself that, statistically speaking, you are much more likely to be in a car accident.
So don't let those, like, vivid images,
Yeah.
hijack our rational thinking. Data over drama.
Precisely. Now think about how this applies to something like, let's say, evaluating employee performance. It's easy to let a recent success or, even a misstep overshadow like months of work.
Yeah.
So to counteract that, you could try keeping records throughout the year, to track both progress and areas for improvement. That way, when it's time for performance reviews, you'll have objective data to reference rather than relying solely on what's most readily available in your memory.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like creating a paper trail to remind ourselves of the bigger picture, even when our brains want to focus on, the most recent or emotionally charged events.
That's a great way to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And here's another strategy you can consider. When you're making a decision, try to, consciously think of examples that contradict your initial assumption.
Oh, interesting.
So if you're thinking about like investing in a friend's business venture because you've heard all these, inspiring stories of entrepreneurial success, pause for a second. Force yourself to recall some instances where similar ventures, they haven't gone as planned.
Oh, I see. So it's like we're giving our brains a more balanced diet of information,
Yep.
including those, less glamorous or exciting tidbits that we tend to overlook.
Exactly. By actively seeking out a wider range of perspectives, both, positive and negative, we can make decisions that are less likely to be swayed by, the seductive simplicity of the readily available narrative.
This has been really eye-opening. It's like we've been operating on autopilot this whole time, just letting our brains take the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
But by understanding this whole availability heuristic thing, we're essentially taking back control of the controls,
Yeah, it's like we've been given this new lens to view the world, one that helps us, see past all that mental smoke and mirrors our brains can create. That's a great way to put it. By understanding the availability heuristic, we can empower ourselves to make more objective decisions, more informed decisions that aren't just based on, what's easiest to recall.
So as we're, wrapping up this deep dive into the world of cognitive biases, what's the most important takeaway you want our listeners to remember about this whole availability heuristic thing?
I think it's important to remember that this heuristic, while it can be, misleading, it's not inherently good or bad. It's a tool. And like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how we use it. By being aware of how much it can influence us, we can start to notice when our thinking is being swayed by those readily available but not necessarily representative pieces of information.
It's like a call to be more mindful, more like critical thinkers,
Yeah.
Especially in a world that's like overflowing with information that's constantly vying for our attention.
Exactly. Question your assumptions, dig a little deeper than those headlines, and just, consider the full spectrum of possibilities, not just the ones that easily come to mind.
So the next time we're about to make a decision based on a gut feeling or even like a vivid memory, we should just, hit that pause button and ask ourselves, is this really the full picture here? Or is my availability heuristic, is it calling the shots?
That's the question to ask. By engaging in, more conscious and critical thinking, we can start making decisions that are more aligned with our goals and values rather than just, reacting to whatever information is, the most readily available.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the inner workings of our minds. A huge thank you to our producer, Victor T., for putting this whole episode together. And to our listeners, remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to, understanding our own biases.